If you reward without effort or without success, that is devastating for a nervous system. In fact, I've gone on record, and I'll say it again and again and again, which is that dopamine that arrives without prior effort destroys people. This is drugs. This is things like cocaine and amphetamine. It's high levels of dopamine with no effort. Okay, they had to buy it, they had to find it, they had to whatever it. But there's no physical effort or mental effort involved in getting the dopamine peak. This is why hard work followed by reward, great. Working hard on a relationship and then it gets better, or there's a breakthrough, or whatever it is. That is powerfully positive. Dopamine that just arrives because you say, oh, you're here, so you get reward, terrible.
Hey, what's up, guys? We just watched a clip with Andrew Huberman and Chris Williamson. We're going to watch a few more clips from Andrew here where he talks about the spice industry and how that interacts with your dopamine schedule and all the things that it does to your brain. And then we're going to take a bit of a left turn from there, but not too hard left. We're going to get into another clip with Candace Owens and Ian Carroll, and they are also going to talk about the spice industry. And then from there, well, just stay with me. We're going to go in a pretty interesting direction with the final clip in this series, but I'll leave that one for a surprise at the very end. With that said, let's get into it.
All of us are here because of the autonomic seesawing that is the reproductive act. It goes from highly aroused...
Is that how you refer to it in your lab?
Yeah, scientists.
Autonomic seesawing.
It is. It's very interesting that the arousal process is one of increase in autonomic arousal in order to get true arousal, but then not so much that it inhibits arousal, then mating behavior, and then the orgasm response in males and females is highly what we call sympathetic, not emotionally. It can be, I suppose, emotionally sympathetic, but from a pure physiology standpoint, it's a hyperactivation of the stress system, even though it has positive valence. And then there's a very quick rebound to the so-called parasympathetic arm of the autonomic nervous system, this deep relaxation, which we don't really know why. I wasn't consulted at the design phase, but we think that post-coital bliss and the kind of relaxing, the desire to not run around a bunch more for most people, was to exchange odorant molecules to increase pair bonding. And even if people aren't trying to pair bond, because people don't always just mate to reproduce, but that some of the molecules that are released in each of the two individuals, oxytocin being the main one, give people a sense of kind of post-coital bliss, and it's a very calm one that creates opportunity for bonding and discussion. There's all like pillow talk. There are other forms of pillow talk too.
Post-nut clarity, Andrew.
Well, but for women, it might be something different, right? Of course, a different name. I only speak in the language of physiology. But for both men and women, this happens. It creates this little orb of closeness that is both physiological but neurochemical too. So what we can say for sure is that whether or not it was in vivo or in a dish, we are all here because two parents, right? A male and a female, unless you're a condor where two females can produce a baby. This has now been shown, right? But as far as we know, where a male and a female reproduce because they each went through this arc of arousal, not too high, arousal, extreme stress, relaxation. That happened separately or together, because in vitro it could be fertilization could be separate. So the test of whether or not we get to reproduce is actually the ability to assuming that people are doing this together and not through in vitro fertilization, is a test of whether or not people can coordinate their autonomic nervous systems. Now there are ways around that and to override it, but by and large, that's the way humans evolved and the way all other animals evolved. Anticipation is the kind of ultimate fuel of the courting dance. Dopamine, if you drive those dopaminergic states too long, addictive drugs, et cetera, people can do this with sex, food, drugs, gambling, social media, all sorts of things, pornography. What ends up happening is the amount of dopamine that's released over time goes down and down and down and down and pretty much is traversing into the territory of pain. And then people, again, are back to this thing where, they're scrolling internet porn 8, 9, 10 times or hours a day, and then they're wondering why this isn't effective for them anymore, whereas it was before. And there's an additional issue with pornography, which is not often discussed, which is that, remember, guys in particular, the brain is a learning prediction machine. And I'm not trying to say that all pornography is bad, but there are good data to support the idea that if your brain learns to be aroused by watching other people have sex, it is not necessarily going to carry over to the ability to get aroused when you're one-on-one with somebody else, right? Especially young kids who are consuming a lot of pornography, the brain is learning sexual arousal to other people having
So
sex.
you're going to program yourself into being a voyeur.
Or just create challenges in sexual interactions with with a real partner. Right?
Mary Harrington has the 3 laws of pornodynamics, and the second law of pornodynamics is the law of FAP entropy. And it says that whatever you start out wanking to will get progressively more intense over time. And I think that this is sort of speaking to that ever sort of escalating amount of the wildness that you need to watch in order to get an ever decreasing stimulus that comes back.
Yeah, and here I'm approaching this only through the lens of biology, right? I'm not a psychologist, and I'm certainly not political in any way. At least not. I have ideas about politics, but I just don't discuss them publicly. But the idea here is that I'm not saying pornography as a stimulus is bad or good. What I'm saying is it, in its availability and its extreme forms, it's a very potent stimulus, and very potent stimuli of any kind, extremely palatable food, extreme pornography, extreme experiences like bungee cord jumping, those set a threshold for dopamine release. And Anna will tell you that, and I'm sure she did, that the higher the dopamine peak, the bigger the drop afterwards. And it's not that you drop to baseline, you drop below baseline. So again, it's not, these things aren't good or bad, they just have to be controlled in a way, because when people are pursuing dopamine peaks over and over and over and they aren't getting them, typically it's because they've been pursuing that activity far too often.
So Andrew is speaking about a couple different things here. He is speaking within the framework of dopamine, and he's discussing addiction in general, and then he's giving us a specific content for that discussion, which is the spice industry. Now, we can take away a couple levels of observation on this. So first of all, in the most direct sense, the consumption of spice makes it more difficult to even find a partner attractive, because your brain has already linked spatially that dopamine release with a third person perspective of the experience due to spice. Second, you have pursued it from an addictive perspective, and so you didn't work for it at all, that dopaminergic release of an orgasm. You didn't earn that through any work, and so you're going to have trouble now earning that with a partner, which the courtship is a necessary step. The courtship is the work, as we heard him discuss. And then lastly, if you do acquire a partner and you do have sex with this partner and then acquire the dopamine release of an orgasm, you are going to get less dopamine as a response, because you've already upset your dopamine schedule so much within the context of this experience that now you can't even experience the reward properly when it does happen through actual true mating. Now there's one more influence that happens on an emergent level almost, and that is the lack of pair bonding. The result of everything I just described leads to the influence where pair bonding is now diminished, because assuming you did find a partner, you guys did have sex, you both orgasmed, whatever, the dopamine's then released. Because that reward system is broken, and because the reward you're feeling is less, you're going to be less inclined for pillow talk. And as gay as that sounds, pillow talk is one of the foundational elements upon which a relationship eventually builds itself. And Huberman describes this himself on a biological level, where he's discussing these different pheromones being exchanged during this process. But it's much more than just the recursive feedback between two people with them exchanging pheromones during this process. There is a conceptual feedback process happening as well, where without even realizing it on a subconscious level, you are feeling each other out to see whether or not in this context you can find a balance between each other's partners. And all of these feedback loops are broken through the consumption of spice. Now that we've kind of gotten into this biological background and we have a good framework, we're going to watch a clip by Candace Owens and Ian Carroll, and we're going to begin to put together a much bigger perspective on this subject.
I mean, explicitly, there's a guy. What is his name? I think it's Al Goldstein. You gotta pull up this Wikipedia, Skylar. If you could pull up Al Goldstein on Wikipedia, explicitly said, like, we created pornography because we hate Christ. This is the literal quote. It's so crazy to read this. Here it is. It's, quote, "The only reason that Jews are in pornography is that we think that Christ sucks. Catholicism sucks. We don't believe in authoritarianism. Pornography thus becomes a way of defiling Christian culture, and as it penetrates to the very heart of the American mainstream and is no doubt consumed by those very same wasps, its subversive character becomes more charged," end quote. I mean, that is just unbelievable. Like, whoa.
100%.
Like, it's like, take it to the bank. We created pornography because we hate Christ. And it's on Wikipedia. This is not like a conspiracy theory.
Every single time.
Not.
Good.
So, I'm here with the one and only Al Goldstein, one of the originators of...
The originator. Fuck the... Larry Flint's a Johnny-come-lately. Larry Flint's a crippled piece of shit. Guccione came after me. Hefner was before me, but he's never been in the sex business.
That's right.
I created this fucking business, and I'm a pathetic, fat, diabetic Jew. And I'm with America's #1 pimp who will speak to you later, Dennis Hoff.
That's right.
Who's famous for having a little cock and lots of pussy.
That's right.
So, he wishes. He wishes. Okay, so...
So you having fun at this?
I love my life. I love pussy.
Yeah.
I love pastrami, and I love kosher pickles. How can life be bad?
Oh, yeah, absolutely not. And you like cigars.
I love cigars. How long have you been in the business now?
Well, we've been doing Reality Check now for about 10 years.
You are a young punk. How old are you?
37.
Pathetic. Pathetic.
I'm wet behind the ears.
Pathetic. You were 6 years old when I was in handcuffs. But anyway, San Francisco is a great town because, I always joke, but it opened everything up first. Hardcore, sexual freedom.
It did.
Your marijuana stuff. I have an apartment in Holland because I love drugs.
Good man.
I became a dope addict 2 years ago. My son's embarrassed. But I'm definitely going to get my medical marijuana certification.
There you go.
But you're always ahead. Do you smoke drugs?
Hell yeah.
You're a good man. The hash in Amsterdam is the best. Okay. I think I shot my load. You're ready for Dennis now.
We're ready to talk to Dennis for a little bit.
I'm not coming at this from a religious perspective. My interest is far more direct. I'm looking at this from the perspective of demographic collapse, in particular as a white person, and the very rapidly declining population statistics of our people as we quietly approach extinction. White people don't even know that they're approaching extinction levels, but we're going to get into it here in a second.
Let's move on now to other stories. The American Census Bureau has released the demographic data showing how the U.S. has changed over the past decade. It is the most detailed account of the demographic changes in the country since the year 2010. U.S. Census data release shows that the United States is an increasingly diverse country, as there have been significant increases in the number of people who identify as multiracial, Hispanic and Asian. These categories have driven much of the population growth between 2010 and 2020. The multiracial population has changed considerably since 2010. It was measured at 9 million people in 2010 and is now 33.8 million people in 2020, which is a 276% increase. The Hispanic or Latino population, which includes people of any race, was 62.1 million in 2020. The Hispanic or Latino population grew 23%, while the population that was not of Hispanic or Latino origin grew 4.3% since 2020. The white population remains the largest race of ethnicity group in the United States, with 204.3 million people identifying as white alone. But its share of the overall population is declining. The white alone population decreased by 8.6% since 2010. The U.S. is now 57.8% white, 18.7% Hispanic, 12.4% black, and 6% Asian. The data also offered new details of the country's slowing rate of population growth. The population growth is lower than it has been at any time aside from the 1930s, and more than half of all U.S. counties lost population from 2010 to 2020. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, and Phoenix remain the 5 largest U.S. cities. Phoenix, which grew faster than any other city in the top 10, surpassed Philadelphia. The fastest growing cities across the U.S. are now in suburban areas. The data release arrives months later than originally expected, as the census took longer to complete due to the pandemic. The delay has forced some states to go to court to postpone their redistricting. States use the data to redraw district lines for the U.S. House of Representatives after each decennial census. Now, the data will shape how $1.5 trillion in federal spending will be distributed to each state and local area. It will also be used by the state demographers to redraw political maps across an increasingly diverse country ahead, of course, of the 2022 midterm election. Our correspondent Susan Teherani has more details on the U.S. Census Bureau report in this next ground report. Take a look.
The The new census report shows that the U.S. population is diversifying and the white population is shrinking. It's a portrait of how the United States has changed in the last decade, and it's important because it is used to redraw the country's political map in the next decade across the United States. It may also be used to help determine the control of the U.S. House of Representatives in 2022 and provide a political edge for the next decade. While the white population did see an increase in some states and communities, the population for individuals under the age of 18 remained quite diverse.
So just listen to the general framing there that's presented. Your people disappearing is celebrated as the increasing diversity of people other than you. This is an inversion of reality. Little do most white people know that in 1900, we were nearly 30% of the global population. And as of this day, we're barely cresting over 7% of the global population. And ask yourself this, what do we call it if we diversify other nations with white people? What if India was about to become only 47% Indians and 53% whites? Well, then it would be called colonization. So this only goes in one direction. Diversity is only a positive thing if it comes at the expense of whites. If whites diversify other nations, we are painted as villains, settlers, and colonizers. Now, this framing matters because it's what takes the wind out of your sails, and it's what prevents you from resisting in the first place. And it's already worked on maybe half of the white population, and you will never ever reach those people. You'll never be able to reason with them. These are people who they didn't want you to go to the grocery store if you didn't take the vaccine. They will castrate their own children on the altar of compliance if that is what is asked from them. And you'll notice that this isn't just happening in the United States. It's not an isolated event. It's happening in the genetic birthplace of our race. It's happening across Europe. I wanted to play those clips because the attack vectors that are causing this demographic collapse are coming from every angle. And each one of those attack vectors is presented as though it's just some emergent property. It's just something that's passively happening. And as the second clip in this reaction video shows, it's not. The proliferation of spice all over the internet and through our culture, it didn't just happen by accident. It was very much done on purpose. And you could see exactly why it was done. And now go ahead and apply that same understanding to every other vector of attack that's killing our demographics. The incredibly high tax rates, those didn't just come out of nowhere. The cost of living didn't just happen to increase in a way that made it really difficult for us to reproduce. Meanwhile, I can go downtown in Brunswick and see a bunch of Somalis living in housing that we paid for in Maine, and they've got tons of kids. I chose these clips so that you could put those pieces together and start looking around yourself and seeing how what is being presented as something accidental, emergent, random, stochastic is none of those things. Not only is it done on purpose, but the fact that it is done on purpose is then very carefully hidden, very intentionally, because the people doing it don't want you to know that it's happening. So remember that number, 30% of the global population in 1900, barely over 7% today. That is an extinction level decline. If you appreciated the content of this video, please like, share, and subscribe and help this channel grow. On a parting note, I'm going to leave you with a little epilogue of what white culture is and just a part of what it is that we're losing. It's worth remembering every single small detail